Hey there, welcome to Her Truth Revealed, Unraveling Our Midlife Era. I'm your host, Wonderful Morrison. This space is for the woman who's done pretending, done hiding, and ready to step fully into her truth. Midlife isn't about fading into the background. It's a time where resilience lights the way and authenticity becomes the loudest voice in the room. In this season of our lives, we are more than just survivors. We are creators, revolutionaries, and unapologetic women rewriting the rules. I've been through my battles, rebuilding from loss, betrayal, and heartache. But here's the truth. Every challenge, every tear, and every setback has led me to this moment of profound transformation. Together, we're going to dive into raw, real conversations that shatter stereotypes, tackle the tough stuff, and embrace the powerful magic that is midlife. So, if you're ready to live this chapter with boldness and joy, hit subscribe. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it and leave a review so we can keep this revolution going. Ladies, no more masks, no more apologies, just the truth of who we are. Let's do this. Hello and welcome to another episode of Her Truth Revealed, Unraveling Our Midlife Era podcast. I'm your host, Wonderful Morrison. And what is this all about? Her Truth Revealed. And what does it have anything to do with being in midlife? Well, here's what I know from my own experience. Midlife is unlike any other stage of a woman's life or any human's life, but we are tight-lipped about the journey, the processes, the suffering that we experience. And so my goal is to have amazing, raw, real conversations with other women who have either experienced midlife already or experiencing midlife that also have a level of expertise that can help us through our own struggles. So before we get started though, just a reminder, thank you so much for following us and for listening to us and for sharing our podcast with everyone you know and love. Please continue to give us your support because this is how we get this conversation started. Today's guest is all the way from across the pond, registered health coach Sonia. I had an incredible conversation with her a few weeks ago about what she knows from a medical perspective of what it is for us women to take care, of ourselves right now so that our future selves can thank us. And I know there's a lot of language out there and a lot of suggestions and a lot of advice, but here's the deal. We should be taking these types of advice from somebody who has been living out this profession for years. So I just would love to introduce you to my newfound friend, Sonia. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So it says here you're a registered health coach. Tell us what that is and how you got to be a registered health coach.
Okay, so everybody knows what a coach is. So I coach people with their health. However, I'm not there shouting at you and yelling at you. I work with you as a partner for you to attain your optimal health. And that is whatever it is to you. So how did I get into health coaching? So my background is I'm a something that they call a nurse practitioner in the UK. So a nurse practitioner specializes in an area of health, specialized in chronic health conditions, the diabetes, the heart diseases, the asthma, what I call the 21st century epidemic. And most of these illnesses are due in part or exacerbated by our lifestyle choices. So I was a nurse practitioner for 45 years. So that's a long time. And I
Yes.
thoroughly enjoyed what I did. But one thing I learned was over that time how much of an impact our choices and lifestyle impacts on our long-term health. So
Mm.
as when I was in the doctor's office, I only had 10, 15 minutes per consultation. So when I retired last year, or when I was looking to retire, I found health coaching. So it meant I could use all my nursing skills and medical skills to actually see people for longer than 10 minutes.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
how can you explain to somebody or have a conversation with somebody in 5 to 10 minutes about something as important as their health and well-being?
Yes. And also, I think, having been, you've probably seen tons and tons of human bodies go through such serious chronic illnesses. Like, that's a serious part of the medical field. It's not a cold or, a tummy ache. It is slowly withering away of a human being. And because you specialized in this field, tell us how we, this group of midlife humans across the world, we've been hearing a lot about self care. Self care has been a big language. Everybody pretty much knows about it. But there's also been a little bit of backlash in self care in terms of like, it's not just going to the spa, it's not just getting, your nails and hair done. In a true health space, I'm 51 years old and I came to see you and I want to care for myself so that my 70-year-old self says, good job and high fives me. What does that mean?
Okay, so if I just paint the picture, so women in their midlife are what I call the sandwich generation. You may or may not have heard this term. And by that, I mean they're in the middle. They may or may not have children who are leaving home, or with us ladies now choosing to have our families later. We might still have children in school. And then on the other side, we have parents who are growing older, needing us more. And then in the middle, we're trying to juggle all of that, hold down a full-time job, and somewhere down the bottom of the list, we just don't seem to have time to really look at ourselves. But we get told, oh yes, as you grow older, you're going to slow down. Yes, there's diabetes in our family, so you got that to look forward to, and things like that. So you just think, oh well, it doesn't matter what I do, that's going to be my fate. I am here to tell you that is not true. And if I just give you a little bit about my personal background.
Yeah, please.
I was divorced in my late 30s, bringing up my daughter on my own. And I also had aging parents. And as a nurse working full time, I'm one of 4 children, but it was, you're the nurse and you're the oldest, you've got this. So that was my responsibility. So I didn't feel stressed or anything, I took it all in my stride. So I thought. And in my for my 40th birthday, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And I'm thinking, hang on, that's a bit weird, but didn't think anything of it. The autoimmune disease was type 1 diabetes. And, I took my medication as I was told. But as I said earlier, when I looked into coaching, I looked into functional medicine coaching. And the difference between functional medicine and conventional medicine is conventional medicine looks at your symptoms and gives you the medication to control those symptoms. So every year you go for your review, being given medication to make your symptoms better. So you would expect to reduce your medication. But every year you're having more medication. And what is happening, you get used to that medication, so you need more medication to control the symptoms. Whereas functional medicine looks at the root cause of your illness. So by dealing with the root cause, addressing the root cause, you get rid of the symptoms. So what happened then and what I learned, because I had to take my own history, practice on myself, and I learned that 16 years or so that I was thinking I was had everything going on all under control. I had a level of stress which I thought I was coping with, but it's like a dripping tap. You know that dripping tap, you think, oh, I've got time to deal with that now. I'll put a bowl under it. I'll get back to it. But you never get back to it. And then all of a sudden, well, it's not all of a sudden, but gradually it overflows and you got this great big mess to deal with. And then you're going, how did that happen? How did I get there? And it's because we weren't paying attention
Yeah.
to the dripping tap.
Wow, what a great analogy. And is it called analogy? Analogy.
Yeah.
Analogy, because that is really, and you could pass it 100 times and think like, oh, there's more room in the bowl. There's more
Correct.
room, right? And so here you are, you're the oldest child, you're a single mom, full-time nurse, which I mean, what we've all learned from COVID, it's not that we've ever dismissed how hard it is to be in the medical profession, but how much weight it takes on one person in that field, right? And then you're taking care of your aging parents. So here we, like you said, you said it so beautifully, like we think we're managing the stress. So when somebody comes in and sees you now and says, okay, I feel like I'm managing my stress, but something feels off. Like one of the biggest emotions that is apparent to midlife women is depression. Depression is a really big space, but we're not also looking at it as like, is it a hormone thing or is it a work thing? What happens when it's all the same? It's all the things. Like you have an external life experience that's happening, and then your inside menopause is happening. And then there's this big emotion that you think you can handle called depression. How could we care for ourselves now that our 70-year-old selves would be like, good job?
The main thing is acknowledging,
Mm.
because even when people come to see me, they will not admit stress. The only people who admit stress are the ones who have had the breakdown. And then when they look back, they go, yeah, I was under stress. But all of us who are bubbling just under the parapet, we haven't got stress. And I call it toxic resilience because people
That's
wear it
good.
as a badge of honor. I can deal with stress, it doesn't bother me. However, when they're trying to rush out of the house in the morning, screaming at the kids, and nobody's happy because there's all this, who's this woman, this screaming banshee? You don't recognize yourself. Or why have I always got a headache, but I haven't got it when I'm on holiday? Or why aren't I sleeping? I'm as tired as anything, but as soon as I put my head down, that's when my mind starts racing. Or my favorite is the Achilles heel. A lot of ladies midlife seem to have issues with water infections or thrush, and they might say, have one every once in a while. And then they're noticing they're happening more closer together. So they're taking more and more antibiotics for the headache. They're happening more often. They're taking more and more. And the other one I find happens a lot in women as well is the sore throat, because they're not voicing their needs. Something's stuck there. So they're not voicing their needs, or the earache, they're not listening to their body.
Oh my gosh. So here's little signs that like our bodies are so smart and so brilliant. It's like a different entity from what our mind knows and thinks. And there's so much more resources and language and conversations out there about being mindful of our bodies. But like you said, that's the big thing is we're we think we can manage the stress, right? Because it's sort of a training. It's an internal training of like, oh yeah, you can look at all the things you've done. Look at how far you've come, right? And then our bodies start to speak to us much clearer than ever before. What would you
A
say is
whisper.
so what would you say is when you're one of the worst clients maybe you've had that didn't think it was as bad as it was? Like what did they come in thinking that they were getting help in? But once you sat down with them, you're like, actually, it's a little bit more than you think.
It was quite interesting because she came to see me because her blood pressure was rising. So she said, I'm fine. My only problem is my blood pressure. So I just said, when did you become aware of a blood pressure issue? And why now are you coming to see me? Because you've had this blood pressure issue for a while. She said, the doctor said if I do not get it under control, they're going to put me on medication. And she just didn't want to go on medication. Also, she had diabetes and she was on medication, but she didn't want to go on insulin.
Okay.
So I said, okay, your problem isn't your diabetes and your blood pressure. This all indicates to me that you are running on fumes. Your cortisol level is raised. And when I trace back when it all started, because they both came together, they came when she got divorced, was a single mom, bringing up her family, and went from working part-time to full-time. So she had all that burden on her because herself wasn't a priority. She was basically making sure her children were all right, wasn't eating right, eating their leftovers. So, we know children's food isn't exactly the healthiest, especially when you're giving them quick food, just get something down them. And we had an hour and a half conversation, a back and forth. She was very resistant in the beginning because also I don't want her to feel like she's being a bad mother or a bad employee or that, she's doing her best with the resources that she has got. And it's amazing how many people feel to eat healthy is expensive. No, the convenience foods are expensive.
Yeah.
As if you get rid of the ultra processed foods, and I'm not saying get rid of them altogether because, they are a necessity at times, but with some gentle planning and just little steps, I'm not saying go in, take everything out of the pantry and turn into, Mother Earth. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, let's have a look at a little thing you can do.
Yeah.
And with her, the little thing I said was, I know you have takeaway, 7 times a week. What if we cut one of those? Because she cooked Sunday dinner, that was fine. But the rest of the time, she just didn't have the time she felt, prepare a meal. So we started, okay, what about when you do that meal on a Sunday, put another one up for the Monday? And we just started that way. And then it's just little things. And then I was asking her, what things could you do? And it's the little changes. And by what I call habit stacking, putting it next to something you already do. Because one of the things we're laughing at, because anybody's going to think all I think about is squats. Anyway, as I was saying to her, you brush your teeth twice a day. Yeah. While you're brushing your teeth, you can do 50. Yeah, I suppose. I said, okay, it's going to feel a bit weird, but that's something good. And if you have any time, like you're waiting for the kettle to boil, rather than scrolling on your phone, have a couple of squats because that is a total body thing. And you don't need special equipment.
Yeah.
Because any health thing, people think they need special equipment, effort, and people don't
Right.
want effort or to have extra effort or things to do in their
Right.
already busy day.
But I think what I love about what you just said is the honesty, right? The truth that you were giving her. Like it was interesting when you said she was in resistance at first, because I think all of us, I mean, if we've made it in life this long, like we're thinking, give me another 20 years and I can keep doing it. The problem we're having is we're suffering internally, right? We're not sharing with people, that I am depressed, or I am having anxiety, or I'm having, hair loss. That's a big one. Or we're not sharing those because we think like we can do. God, look how far I've come. I've been able to raise children by myself. I've been able to keep a job. I've been able to do all of these things. The truth telling from a professional is where it gets tricky, because you're right. Sometimes it can feel like we're being judged of, oh my gosh, I'm doing my best. How dare you tell me? I mean, you've had 45 years of practice. Like that's part of the thing you probably really sharpened your skill in how did you do it for yourself when it was time to look at your own life and you were in that space?
Okay. I had an opportunity. As I said to you, I did the health coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I qualified, I joined an accelerator course, because newly qualified health coach, never run a business before. So I joined an accelerator course where they gave you a done for you.
Mm.
And I thought, well, I'm one of these people. I can't tell you it's good for you unless I've experienced it myself. So they said, yeah, but you got diabetes. I said, so the people I'm going to come across are going to have long-term conditions, including diabetes. I said, but the thing is, my background in long-term conditions, that's a piece of me. I know how to, manipulate those. So I was originally put on the program for 2 weeks. And because I am a cheeky madam, they said, oh, check with your GP, make sure you're fit enough. Check with who? I was the expert in the surgery for people
Mm.
with long-term conditions. Well, the top 5 ones. So I just said, I just went along. However, I did this program, and the first 2 weeks I saw such an effect. I said, I want to do the whole program. Okay, I'm going to do the whole program. And that is where I learned my lesson. So I learned to look at my eating, and it wasn't, keto, paleo, whatever. It was common sense. It was a common sense diet. Exercise wasn't called exercise. It was called joyful movement. Whatever gets you to move your body. If you want to dance in your kitchen, if you want to dance when you're doing the hoovering, if you want to do hula hooping, knock yourself out. And how you talk to yourself, self-talk. One of my biggest things that I had to learn was, if I did anything a bit silly or I dropped anything, I'd go, you clumsy clot. And it was stop, because you're reinforcing that you are clumsy and a clot. And so when you're speaking to yourself, speak to yourself as you would a loving mother to a child, and forgive yourself. That's the other thing. As I was saying to you, once you acknowledge something, you can do something about it. If you do not acknowledge it, then how can you do anything about it? And when I realized that I had not brought the diabetes onto myself, but had contributed to it, not realize it or identifying the stress, then I learned, hang on, stress, chronic stress, like that dripping tap, leads to chronic inflammation, which leads to
Mm.
long-term condition. And that's why we see so much autoimmune diseases at the moment, because our body is, whispering, we're not listening, and then it puts us on our back, and then we got no thing but to listen. So I learned by going through that program. It's like they say, the shoemaker's children have the worst shoes. And my daughter always says to me, remember when you used to send me to school, I'd be dying, and you get the phone call, can you come and get your daughter? She can't get her head out the toilet. She's still being sick, okay, type thing. So it's, we think we know better. We can see it in other people, but we don't recognize it in ourselves. And the other
Oh,
big
that's
thing
good.
I like is take the advice you would give your best friend. Why don't you take your own
Right,
advice?
right. I mean, such a poignant way to remind ourselves that, how we care for ourselves now really does matter. So I've been listening to a lot of other podcasts where they have, physical fitness experts and dietitian experts that are saying things like, when you exercise in your phase, it's what your body's going to be thankful for or not thankful for in your 60s and that type of thing. Why does it take so long for our bodies to acclimate to either stress or caring for ourselves? Like, because that's the thing. The discipline and the consistency, let's be completely honest, is more difficult when you're older. It's easy when you're in your 20s because you're doing it, you're motivated by the external validation, right? When you go out there, you fit the great jeans and blah, blah, blah. But the older you get, you do less socializing, you do less. How do we consistently stay into the discipline of caring for ourselves?
Because we're doing it for us. It's well known that external factors can only take us so far.
Mhm.
You need to be doing it for you. So, for instance, going back to my squats, okay, my big thing about squats is the number of older people who tell me how they lose their dignity because they need help to get off the toilet. Okay. So I've got two things. One, nobody's going to be helping me get off the toilet. I will be getting off the toilet myself, thank you. And should I have a tumble in later age, I am the one who's going to get myself up. Again, the number of people I've heard have been lying on the floor for hours until somebody came in to see them. So what I find motivates people is if you ask them, how do they envisage their life in 10, 20 years' time? And it's things like, I want to be around for my grandchildren. I want to be fit enough to play with my grandchildren. I want to be fit enough to walk my daughter down the aisle, and it's finding out what is important for that person. We don't all have the same goals. Other people I want to go on, not me personally, but I've heard I'd like to go on a cruise. I'd like to travel. Well, you have to have a level of fitness, vitality, and function to be able to do those things. And especially if somebody has worked all their life, they're ready, coming up to retirement, and they envisage their retirement to be a certain way. Well, if they stay on the path they're on, they're not going to get there. As I say, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And a sobering thought is we start to lose our cardiac health from our late 30s, our cardiac fitness. So we do, and it does correspond as well with, how do I put it, as we are getting the trappings of success,
Yes.
not walking as much because we've got a nice shiny car, you know,
Yes.
we can afford to go to restaurants, rather than going to the market to buy the fresh stuff, etc. So it's a double-edged sword. We work hard. Yes, I should be able to go to that restaurant or to buy that car, etc. But we also have to be aware, not in moderation, because even moderation for some people is an excess. So
Yeah.
all these things which are nice to have, they're great for a treat, but if we keep having them, they actually become like, as I say to people, it's like overdose. It's like,
Mm.
oh, yes, it's nice to have a takeaway on a Friday, end of the week. But if you have 5 a week,
Right.
starting to do things in excess. It's like, yes, it's nice to say have that gin and tonic, at the end of the day. But what if it becomes 2, 3, or 4? So something that was a treat then becomes an excess and is doing harm to your body, because our bodies can deal with things. I shouldn't say deal with things, respond to amount and frequency. So it can deal with, like, if you have to run for a bus, you'll run for a bus. You might sit on a bus and, oh my goodness. But if you have to run all the time, there's also a limit that your body is comfortable with. There's a limit, there's a degree which keeps us functioning and healthy. But even exercise, if done to excess, is over stressing the body, because exercise stresses the body, which is a good stress. However, if you over exercise, that does harm to the body. It's like everybody is different, and if we listen to our bodies, it will guide us.
And that's really the key to this entire conversation is when we are being truthful with who we are and we listen. Like you can tell us a bajillion different ways that we can avoid this or avoid that. But if it's our bodies, I love what you're saying because I thought being a vegetarian was the best thing for me. Unfortunately, there's different types of vegetables because of where I was when I was my original habitat of the foods I ate is not the same foods that I have currently where I'm at now. So as my habitats have changed, so has the food sources, but there's certain food sources my body just is not acclimated to or will ever acclimate to, which happens to be a lot of food that grows in the area I live now that I can't have. But I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that because what I know is plants are great. Plants are, so amazing for our bodies. But if I didn't listen to my body, half of the plants I was eating was actually inflaming my body. And because that's not what I was used to. So I think we can't take blanket conversations or sayings that people have of like, plants are good for you and then just take it as it is. We have to what you're saying is we have to be mindful and listen to our bodies and listen to the advice of medical professionals and registered health coaches, and then create our own dynamic that fits for us. That is like, I know it probably sounds like our audience is like, duh. Yeah, duh. We still need to do.
The thing is, as well, we have to do our own due diligence because we don't have the same ethnicities. We weren't all brought up the same way. What works for me doesn't work for my sister, actually, things like that. And I subscribe to something called the cheese plant leaf theory. Okay. So I got my basic beliefs, and then something will come along and I'll give it a go. But as you know, with cheese plants, there's always little gaps. So you've got to turn the leaf a little bit to cover that gap, but you've still got gaps. So you think, okay, so what's missing? And then you find something else and that covers up some other gaps. And you work out the combinations that works for you. One of the things I learned, which actually blew my mind, was when you look at our countries of origin, we're brought up with the foods that have grown in the soils there. And we know now that the soil now in the agricultural revolution, etc., the soil isn't as healthy as it was, where they used to do the crop rotation, and leave a field enough time to replenish. But no, they're trying to get as much stuff as they can. So the soil doesn't recover. So to make up for the poor produce, they fertilize this, they put this, and then you've got all those chemicals, and then you've got those phytoestrogens which are causing us problems. Not only are we going through the menopause, we're having these estrogens that we're being exposed to. And that's before we put the moisturizers on us and the perfumes and everything else. So we're being bombarded internally and externally. And it's just to be aware. And as I say to people, you just do the best you can with the resources you have, because even rich people, even rich wealth, they have all the monetary resources, but what do? They go and have this special perfume made for them, or they'll have, do all these extra things, and then they just put in all these chemicals and stuff on themselves when you would think, oh, they would be the ones trying to get rid of it. But again, it's the trappings of success.
Yes, I love that how you say that too, because I think all of us have experienced a time in our lives where we were trapped by our own success. And, eventually we do see the outcome, good or bad, from that experience. And what a gift of for life to show us consistently that we need to take care of ourselves. Okay, so Sonia, I have one last question before we end the show here. Let's say you're walking down the street and you go into a coffee shop and you see 25-year-old Sonia. What would you say to 25-year-old Sonia that she would actually listen to?
She wouldn't listen to any of it. Thing is, you can't make anybody listen. They have to be ready. They have to be at a point when they are looking to change. Because if you look at the average 20, 30-year-old, because I'm thinking of my nieces and nephews, and at this particular moment in time, you can't tell them anything. You can't. They're living their best life, and they see, right, so I'm double their age, and they see me as old, okay? So they're enjoying their lives, etc. And all I'm trying to do is stop them having fun. Where people, it is though. And what I find is when youngsters or adults, once they start having children, then they see the world with a different lens, is what I've noticed. Before they are ready, until you're blue in the face. And my experience of that is one of my specialities is respiratory. And at the time, then husband smoked. And I could talk to him until I was blue in the face, Okay, he's not my husband now. It has come to pass. What I predicted is what happened. He now has chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and heart failure. As an example, if people aren't ready to listen,
ready to yeah. That's an honest, I think that's an honest response that the 25-year-old Sonia wouldn't have listened.
35-year-old would.
And I think that, too many times we either get too nostalgic about, oh, if I saw my 25-year-old self, I'd shake her. But also in the same breath, would we be who we are today if we intervened at that time in our lives? And I would often say, when I was asked this question, I wouldn't have said anything to my 25 years. I would have hugged her. I would have just been the stranger at the coffee shop that physically touched her and hugged her and then walked away, because that would have made a difference to me then. Nothing else that anybody would have said at 25. I don't know.
Would
I
you
don't
have
know.
been worried that you had invaded her space?
Well, no, because it's just something interesting. I feel like warm weathered people, so I come from a very warm country, are very social. We'd
Yeah.
say hello to each other, we hug each other. We're a very touchy group of
Yeah.
people when you're warm. And then I moved to a part of the world that was a little bit colder more often. And so the temperament was different of people. And I missed it. I really missed physical engagement. I missed, the hellos. But you don't know that because you get acclimated to your arena. A hug from a stranger would have been welcomed for me.
Because it's quite interesting, because I'm in the UK. I was born in the UK. So, we're as cold as winter. And it is very much that you kept yourself to yourself. Okay, as a nurse, I would be able to cross that line,
Yeah.
but I'd have to ask permission. So it's really interesting you say that, because all through my nursing career, and it wasn't until the end, because you couldn't, you didn't hug people, etc. It wasn't until I came near the end of my career where I was, that person needs a hug. And especially when I was, because I was in the same doctor's office for a long time, and these people and I had grown up, and I would say, do you need a hug? And they go, yes, please. And I'd be able to hug them. But up until then, my nursing career was no physical contact unless, consent and you were doing a procedure,
Yeah.
whatever. And it is quite interesting, because now the older I am more prone to giving people a hug compared to earlier.
Yeah, yeah. And I think my 25-year-old self would have just appreciated that more than words that I heard. So, well, thank you so much for so much to think about. I took so many notes here of I loved what you said about toxic resilience. I think that is a huge conversation we need to be having, because that is what's keeping us up at night. Right. I had a friend that had a really hard time sleeping for 2 months. And she said it wasn't even because she was thinking of anything. I think her body was just catching up to the stress by the end of the day. That it
Tired
just
and
kept her.
wired, I call it. Tired and
Yeah.
wired.
So I love what you said about that. And I wrote down a bunch of notes about forgiveness is a daily act. Self-forgiveness. Who knew self-forgiveness was the same power as squats, people? Squats. If you forgive yourself and you do squats, oh my gosh, we're healthier. Sonia, I appreciate you and I appreciate what you do. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and your brilliance with us. I never even asked how young you were, but would you mind sharing that with us, or do
Yeah.
you want?
No, it doesn't bother me. I'm 64.
And at 64, your knowledge of a 45-year experience in this field. Ladies, when you're listening and you are looking for a health coach, because the thing with even being in the UK is you could do it all virtually, but I would highly suggest figuring out how we could take care of ourselves today so that we can really unravel our midlife, right? Really, because I feel like I'm at the age where I'm more vibrant than I've ever been.
Yeah.
But I'm also like more aware that my body needs to rest more often. So
I love the saying, we're teenagers, right? So we're
getting
teenagers.
that down.
We have our own car. Nobody gives us a curfew. We have our own money, and we can do what we like. So all the things
I
we wish
love
we
it.
could do as a teenager, we do as a teenager. And if any of your listeners would like to contact me, I'm on social media And I do have a program if these ladies want to look at looking after themselves into their later years. It's never too late. I just meet you where you are, and we make sure you can have the later life you want so that your health span and your lifespan are in alignment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. If you loved this episode, please leave us an amazing review. Like my mother says, if you got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. And thank you so much for following us. Don't forget to share this episode to somebody that you know that will benefit from this. Our goal is to bring you value every single week with our audience. So please keep us in the loop with following our social media at Her Truth Revealed, following us on the podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. This is also going to be on YouTube. Thank you so much again, everyone. Until next time, stay healthy, stay strong, and let's unravel this life together. Thank you very much. Until next time. Bye. Thank you so much for being with me on today's journey. If you felt something resonate, if you saw yourself in this conversation, please take a moment to subscribe. Share it with a friend who needs this space and leave a review. It helps others find us, and it's a small way you can be a part of this powerful movement. Ladies, this isn't just a podcast. It's a community, a revolution, a place where midlife women come together to embrace our hard-earned wisdom and vibrant truth. So thank you for being part of this. Remember, it's time. It's time to step into our truth. No more holding back. Midlife is ours to own, and it's only getting started. So, until next time, take a breath, honor your journey, and live with audacity, courage, and joy. This is our time, our truth, unraveled, revealed, and celebrated.